election coverage can be highly dangerous for media practitioners as political campaigning is ramping up ahead of the local government elections. In fact, the live visuals you're seeing right now are those of the leader of the Democratic Alliance, the main opposition in the country, John Steenhuisen, addressing in Cape Town as they start their election campaign. But we're going to slightly change this discussion, focusing the attention on issues of safety, not only for politicians, but also journalists. In KwaZulu-Natal, for example, gunmen opened fire on community members who were participating in nominations of ANC candidates for councillor lists. Now, 3 women were killed in that particular incident, while others were injured. And the Media Monitoring Africa Director now, William Bird, joins us to speak specifically about the safety of journalists. William, viewers might be wondering why we are discussing this particular issue. During the unrest, or let's just say the events that led up to the unrest in July, outside of Nkandla, an SABC journalist was attacked. And I have yet to hear whether those who assaulted him have actually been arrested. Then, during the unrest, this was now in Johannesburg, our very own colleagues here at Newzroom Afrika, we had our vehicle shot at. Literally, you had bullet holes. And you can imagine if our colleagues were inside that car, where they would be right now. So I'm putting forward these examples to ask you whether we as members of the media should be concerned going into this election.
Good morning. I mean, the short answer to that is yes, obviously we need to be concerned and deeply concerned. I mean, I think that journalists now going into any situation where they have even the slightest hint that there may be elevated tensions there should probably be wearing protective gear. They need to make sure that they take whatever precautions, and they should actually be looking at giving them specialist training to deal with those kinds of very dangerous scenarios. So I think that it's clear, you know, and over the last 12 months, we've seen this continued escalation in tensions in South Africa more broadly, but also against journalists. You know, the attacks on journalists, the physical threats at the start of the year. You know, we had the journalists being intimidated just for going up to certain political parties, speaking to them, etc. So you know, it's not isolated to one newsroom. It's now seemingly vaguely, you know, a common occurrence across many and most of our major media houses, and that is a real threat. And the reason why ordinary members of the public should be as deeply concerned about this is because we rely on the media to tell us, to go into the most dangerous situations, to show us and to tell us what's going on, to explain to us what's going on. You know, had it not been for our media going into the different areas towards the end of July, showing us the violence, showing us those things, we would very well not have had much of an idea, or we would have only to relied on unreliable sources. You know, so when you hit an election period, the role of journalists and media becomes even more critical, because we're relying on journalists and media to go there, say, this is what so-and-so said, this is what these people are saying, and this is what's actually going on here, to explain things to us, to help us understand the kind of tensions and explain that violence. If they can't do that, if they can't go there and perform their jobs in a safe and secure manner, our entire election's credibility is brought into question. It's that serious of an issue, you know. So I think that one of the things we must be demanding now of all political parties, whenever you have them on air, is ask them what their position is in relation to safety of journalists. Do they have a policy on it? When was the last time they spoke out about it publicly? Because unless our political parties are actively saying, journalists are there, you need to leave them alone, they need to be able to do their job. If there's an issue of bias or whatever, there are all sorts of ways that can be done with that. There are complaints, there are lots of mechanisms that can be dealt with that thing, but they need to be clear and unambiguous and vociferous in their protection of our journalists. Because if they aren't, they're undermining the very system that they're out there campaigning for.
It's interesting you speak about the responsibility of political parties, William. In fact, as I speak to you, moments ago we had the visuals, live visuals of the Democratic Alliance, which is launching its election campaign in the city of Cape Town. So before we get into what safety precautions journalists should take, should they feel that their lives are under threat, let's focus the attention a bit on political parties. What should they be saying, not just to members, but also people who support them on the ground in communities, about the safety of journalists?
So, ordinarily these things are a little bit more clearly spaced and timed, but the political parties will, I'm not sure if they have already, and forgive me if they have, they will be signing under the code of conduct for the elections. And part of that is about safety, is about peace, is about not escalating tensions, not putting out disinformation as another clear example. So what parties need to be doing is having respect for the democratic process. The democratic process says, if I want to run a political party that says I believe in trees should be running our government, well and good. I'm entitled and I should be allowed to go anywhere in South Africa and tell the people I think we should vote for trees. Right? That's the basic principle of it. Any democratic party should be able to go and exercise their rights anywhere and campaign wherever they want to go in South Africa, and they shouldn't be hindered in doing their job from campaigning. Similarly, if a journalist needs to go and report on what's going on, it is just the same as those political parties want to be able to go and campaign anywhere and have their say. It's just as important that media and journalists are able to go anywhere and report, unhindered on what's going on and report on the events to be able to give context. So when political parties talk about this, they need to talk about why protecting journalists is so important, and they need to then talk about what actions they will take if any member of their party or aligned to their party is involved in intimidating or harassing or threatening or being violent against the journalists. So it's not just about, as you said at the start of this, there were some SABC journalists who were clearly threatened live on TV. What action has been taken by whichever political party and whichever people are responsible? We need to be making sure that there are consequences for those actions, because unless and until we do, the political party can just, say, oh no, we didn't have anything to do with it. Yeah. Now is our best time to get accountability from political parties. We need to push them hard on these issues, make sure they make real meaningful commitments to protection of our journalists. Yeah. Because our democracy depends on it.
William, as I let you go, very briefly if you can, I'm a journalist, and I think, as we all know, many newsrooms are going to be taking a number of their teams to various communities spread out across South Africa. Should I feel that my life is threatened, or should I sense that people are saying things that make me think that I may be under threat, what are the safety precautions? What do I do?
Well, look, this is why I said at the beginning, I think that our journalists need specialist training to deal with tense situations. A lot of journalists usually learn these kinds of things on the job. And most of them are completely crackers. They go into scenarios where there are lots of crazy people with guns and where tensions are already high. They'll frequently go and report on service delivery protests or community protests or whatever events are going on, and they'll be there, So it's a lot of that comes down to personal judgment and knowing and understanding where the tensions are and knowing which side and where you need to be and what kind of escape routes you can plan for yourself, that your car is nearby, that you've got a colleague who knows where you are, that you've got your colleagues back if you're there with a photographer or camera person, that you're able to make sure that you can keep track of those things. And then also, depending on the situation and scenario, obviously it's a good idea to inform, the authorities, the police, that you are there and that this is what you're doing, so that if necessary, they are able to then step in and afford protection if they need to.
That's William Bird. He is a director at Media Monitoring Africa. Thank you very much for that important advice to fellow media colleagues like myself. Thanks indeed for that. We'll certainly be putting that into practice as we go into the ground.